about through the previous two backgrounding tutorials. Now we're going to take a look at backgrounding, continuing our backgrounding if the person is a professional who belongs to like a doctor or a lawyer that is regulated by some sort of a regulatory body. So in the case of physicians, it is the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario or Quebec or Ontario or Nova Scotia or New Brunswick or whatever the jurisdiction might be. And those regulatory bodies are there to set the rules, and they're also there to lay down the law in terms of discipline, that kind of thing. All right. So this is one of the first questions that you should ask yourself. And again, this is covered in Digging Deeper, in the backgrounding, researching people chapter, which is chapter 7, researching and finding people. And really what we need to do is to be connecting the dots. And as we point out in that chapter, and this might be a test question, so it's important to keep tabs on this. But one of the first questions that you have to ask about an individual is if that individual is a member of a professional organization. And by professional organization, again, we mean that folks who belong to organizations that are regulated by some sort of a provincial body. And in this case, we're talking about lawyers, we're talking about doctors, we're talking about accountants, architects. They are all examples of the kinds of professions that are regulated. And it's important that when you are backgrounding someone, obviously one of the first things that you want to find out is what they do for a living. So if, for example, you are interviewing a candidate for municipal, provincial, or federal office, you would probably want to know what they do for a living. Because one of the reasons that they may be running for office is that they want to bring their expertise to the public arena. As a former accountant or a former executive or a former lawyer, there was a time when the majority of politicians were actually lawyers, right? So this would be a really good way to background them. And again, a really good reference for this, all of this stuff is chapter 7 of Digging Deeper, which I will expect you to go through and to make notes. Okay. So again, one of the first questions that you need to ask is, does this individual belong to a professional organization that is subject to being regulated? And in this case, we know that it is the individual in question might be a doctor. So let's just take a look at the story here. And this is, okay, Toronto neurologist charged with several counts of sexual assault. It's a CTV story, so we just click on that. And we can see that Toronto neurologist charged with several counts of sexual assault. Not a great picture, provided by the Toronto Police Service. That's probably why. Toronto-based neurologist has been charged with 5 counts of sexual assault in relation to a string of incidents that took place between 2002 and 2016. Police said that the suspect allegedly sexually assaulted 5 patients while working as the director of the Wasser Pain Management Center at 600 University Avenue South, College Street. Alan Gordon, 75, was arrested on Friday and charged with 5 counts of sexual assault. Okay, so that's the story. And these are regular stories that you'll find, because if a doctor is disciplined or a lawyer is disciplined and disbarred or the doctor, the physician in question, is prevented from practicing, that is newsworthy for obvious reasons. And as we saw in the case of bankruptcy, it's a public record because other patients, who might not have known about this development might want to come forward and file their own complaints. So that's one of the reasons that this becomes public information. So if we wanted to find out a little bit more about Alan Gordon, we can copy his name. Let's go back to the website. And if we go to the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario, okay, and if we click on the general, okay, this is so you can do a general search on if you want, okay. But if we go to discipline decisions, go down to discipline decisions, and you can see here that they list the most recent decisions, but they don't give you an exhaustive inventory. And so the good doctor's name is not on here because, as we can see from the story, it happened a while ago. So in order to find out more information about him, you might want to go to the Find a Doctor page, and we can plug in his last name and his ID number. The problem in this case is that his license has been taken away. So you'd have to use an advanced search, right? Search doctors no longer registered. And then here you can type in, you can just plug in his last name and his first name. And again, we can specify male. We don't have to, we can just leave all in terms of the type of doctor, and that should be enough. Okay, and whenever possible, whenever you're doing searches on these websites, you should really use the advanced search option for reasons of being able to provide more specificity to your search. And if we do a submit, whoops, Alan Gordon.
His last name is probably Gordon.
I got it backward, hang on. Okay. Alan, oops, come on. Let me try this again. So advanced search, Gordon. You guys have probably done this quicker than I have. Alan. Okay. And there we have it, Alan Gordon. Middle name Selig, I think. See, neurology, concerns, or additional info, hospital privileges, previous hearings, concerns. And if we click on the link, we have a summary and previous hearings, and here is a detail of the situation where the patient, for obvious reasons, is identified with a pseudonym. And you can read the entire history right there. Rather concerning. Okay, which is why he's no longer practicing. Okay, so that's how you can do it. And if it's for example, if we scroll down to Halifax doctor's license revoked following a relationship with a vulnerable patient. Okay, in this case, Graham Bethune. Okay. Halifax doctor has had his license to practice revoked for engaging in an inappropriate relationship with a quote-unquote vulnerable patient. That quotation probably comes from the actual report itself, and that's generally how we use quotations, right? Is if we want to get really specific, take information from primary documents such as this, then that's the way we would do it. And these disciplinary hearings, these are quasi-judicial as well. So the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Nova Scotia has announced. Okay, the college said a complaint against Dr. Graham Bethune was submitted, and an investigation was conducted under the Nova Scotia Medical Act. Okay? Bethune was in the process of retiring, he told the CBC at the time. So they were able to conduct, I guess, an interview with him at some point. So then if we wanted to find out a little bit more about him, we can go into disciplinary decisions, interim license sanctions, the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Nova Scotia, and fairly recent, there he is. Okay, Dr. Graham Bethune, and if we click on the link, right, then we have a bit more information. He committed professional misconduct by engaging in an inappropriate, and that's where the term comes. That's where the term is quoted from, in inappropriate personal relationship with a vulnerable patient. Okay, the hearing was satisfied that the proposed agreement was appropriate for the circumstances. The committee determined that its reasons for the decision are subject to a publication ban in order to protect the patient. So, you know, this is another example of the levels of disclosure really vary depending on the jurisdiction. Nova Scotia does not have a great record when it comes to a level of disclosure, sharing of information. But anyway, this is a good way to conduct searches and disciplinary hearings and decisions and interim license sanctions. And as we can see, we have a list of doctors here that go back some ways. Okay, so this actual search engine, I would suggest, is a little bit better than the Ontario's because they give you all of the decisions as a one-stop shop. You don't have to use an advanced search and whatnot. So it's a little bit more user-friendly than the Ontario one is. So that's essentially what you would do in the case of a physician. Before we move on to lawyers, any questions about this process? Okay, let's move on then. And then there's an example for Quebec. So the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Quebec. If we let's click on this story here, and it's in French. But essentially, it's the Dr. Richard Payer. He's a psychiatrist at the Maniwaki Hospital, and his license has been suspended for 4 months. And he pleaded guilty in regards to 3 complaints. And the decision was rendered on June the 29th. And he was admonished for basically inappropriately prescribing medication. So that's what this means here. So that if we go back to the website, our website, and again, just like in Quebec, as was the case in Nova Scotia and Ontario, if we click on the link here, we get a list of disciplinary hearings. And if we can get his name here. And let's conduct our search. All right. Okay, there he is. See the decision. And there is the decision. Because this must be an ID number of some kind. And it is in French, but there you have it. Okay. So for Marianne, for example, if she was doing writing a profile of someone in, say, Sherbrooke, and that person was a doctor, this is the kind of search that she would be able to do in Quebec. And this is the same in any jurisdiction. Okay. And as we can see, this is a fairly detailed explanation, unlike the situation in Nova Scotia. This is a fairly detailed explanation of what happened. And again, this is a court document. It's a private record. You can quote freely from this. It's not a problem whatsoever. And, this is the kind of research that you would want to conduct if the person was a doctor. Same thing for a lawyer, for example. You would do the same kind of search. Nationally, it's the Law Society of Upper Canada. If we click on the link here, we can see complaints. Okay. How to make a complaint. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay, here we have the Law Society Tribunal. And this is in Quebec. Okay, the Law Society Tribunal is an independent adjudicative tribunal within the Law Society of Ontario. The tribunal process, this is Ontario, by the way, not Quebec, but it's just a bilingual title here. The tribunal process hears and decides regulatory cases about Ontario lawyers and paralegals in a manner that is fair, just, and in the public interest. And here you have calendar hearings, you have available dates, you have case documents. Okay. So it's really just a question of, I'm not going to spend too much time here because I think that the searches that I showed you how to do on the doctors' websites really apply for lawyers, regulatory bodies for lawyers, depending on what jurisdiction you're in, or the regulatory body for any other professional organization. Really, it's all the same, right? You can go to their website, and they will have a section where all of the decisions are posted, and depending on the jurisdiction, the ease with which you can find this information varies, as we saw comparing, say, Nova Scotia to Ontario. It was easier to actually find the information on the Nova Scotia website because it was all there on one page. It's a one-stop shop, whereas in Ontario, we had to use the advanced search. But those are things that you can navigate yourself when you're doing, when you're conducting